Welcome back to Fox 32 Sunday. Commissioner Jesus Chuy Garcia, candidate for mayor, is with us right now. And the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, your opponent, Bob Fioretti, they're very upset about this campaign contribution that you took. And they say then you turned right around and voted for approval of a red light camera location.
The mayor knows it's not true.
So explain what happened.
This is a campaign contribution from someone I've known over 30 years. They've been supporting me for alderman, for state senate, for Cook County commissioner. $1,500 contribution. It had nothing to do with the vote.
And it came in on the day before
the vote. Yeah, the request came in from River Forest to engage in an intergovernmental agreement. River Forest.
River Forest.
Yeah, they picked the vendor. They decided to install it. We had nothing to do with that decision. It wasn't about authorizing the installation of a red light camera. It had nothing to do with that.
So what should we do with red light cameras now that they're out there on the street?
I think we need to scale back dramatically on them. Per the University of Texas study that was done, they are only effective, apparently, in preventing accidents about 14% of the time. That means they're there to pickpocket Chicagoans, to raise revenue, and we've become blinded by the money. The mayor has become blinded by the money.
Well, he's got good reason, though. The next mayor is going to be worried about money, and if it's you, how will you pay for these billions of dollars in unfunded pension liabilities that we have for police and fire and over at the Board of Ed for teachers?
Once the Supreme Court rules, the state legislature acts, will know what we owe. Then we can do things like take a portion of the tax increment financing dollars, sit down with the stakeholders and work out a plan, but demonstrate good faith. That's the process of involving people, of being inclusive and engaging in dialogue versus going at it unilaterally.
How much TIF money? There's a big dispute about how much TIF money is available for that. How much do you think is available?
I think there's a significant amount. I'd say upwards of $500 million are available. I would take only a portion of that.
That doesn't even cover 1 year's worth of what we have to come up with next year.
But you don't have to come up with the entire amount. I think you could sit down and discuss it. You could make a good faith down payment. I suggest $200 million to demonstrate that you acknowledge it, you recognize it, and you work out a structured payment plan.
So what do police, fire, what do the teachers, what do those unions do in return for the taxpayers? You know, they say, you know, the taxpayers have to pay. I mean, there have been big tax increases over the last few years. There was a huge income tax increase at the state level. Taxpayers have sacrificed already. What are you going to ask the unions to do?
Well, look, moving forward in terms of new hires, we can talk about changing that. But for those who are current retirees,
have the new hires be in a different system?
That's a real possibility. We may have to go to something like that, but you do it through dialogue. You don't do it unilaterally and impose it on people, because that creates friction and you clash unnecessarily.
So existing employees, retirees, do they make any concessions? The COLA, the cost of living adjustment goes down, or do you oppose making any changes like that?
I think we have an obligation to the retirees and current employees. For future employees, we can have that conversation, and we may have to go down that road.
All right, you don't want to get into it. You don't want to get into the details.
It's a bit much to discuss at this point, because the court hasn't ruled yet, and we don't know what the accurate picture is.
We got 2 quick minutes.
Sure.
And you've talked about considering recreational marijuana. Why?
I think the Colorado experiment is something to learn from in terms of its effects on crime, its effects on impairment of people who use it, if there's any, and also the revenue shouldn't be discarded. We're in some tough financial straits, so I say let's study what happens.
About 50-60 million, I think, in that in the first year or so. I mean, that's not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. No panacea by any stretch of the imagination.
So, but you'd have Chicago consider it, and Illinois would take action by the General Assembly, obviously.
Depending on what we learn from Colorado, it's a possibility.
And what are you seeing out there?
So far, nothing very unfavorable. Crime doesn't seem to be impacted.
So you might be leaning towards legalizing recreational?
So far, early indications are that it isn't having a detrimental effect in Colorado. So I remain open-minded about it.
All right. And tell me about, in these final 8 days, these final 9 days, When you are up against a $30 million campaign war chest, what's the way to compete?
You speak to the important issues, and I think the important issue in this campaign is public safety. We've given $100 million in tax subsidies to very wealthy corporations and individuals. Certainly we can find $100 million to pay for hiring 1,000 additional police officers to engage in community policing in Chicago. The mayor says that we can't afford it. I say we can't afford 10,000 additional shootings over the next 4 years.
9 field offices. What are the, what is your campaign doing in those 9 field offices?
We're knocking on doors in neighborhoods all over Chicago. We're making phone calls. We're preparing an army for Election Day to get the vote out, to move forward with victory.
All right. Commissioner Garcia, the candidate for mayor of Chicago, thanks very much for joining us. Coming up next, government corruption here is an odious scourge. 2 authors, Thomas Gradle and Dick Simpson, have written a new book about the history of it called, quote, Corrupt Illinois, Patronage, Cronyism, and Criminality. They join us right after this break.